All right, so 7:02, let's get started. I want to thank you everybody for logging in and joining me today for Eden's Counseling Group's Wellness Webinar Series. This month, we're going to be working on adulting with ADHD, tips, tricks, and tools. So I want to start with just a few housekeeping things. So as I said, this is a monthly webinar series, and so this is going to be recorded for you to view later on. So with that in mind, I do want to encourage everybody to just do communications through the chat. So if you have any questions, comments, or if we're interacting with the presentation, please keep it into the chat, and I will go over some of those questions at the end of the presentation. A few other things. There is an info packet that you will receive as part of this presentation, and that'll be uploaded into the chat box as well. The handout is going to have pretty much all the information that we're going to go through with the presentation, as well as a few kind of like worksheets and exercises that you can do to really help kind of get started on some of these tips and tricks to implement them in your own life. So without further ado, let's get started. So a little bit about me. My name is Brittany Grono. I am a practicum student, currently doing my internship at Eden's Counseling Group in the Sugar Land location. I am supervised by Holly Lark. She's a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Houston Clear Lake, currently working towards my licensed professional counselor licensure. A little bit about me and my approach to counseling is I take a very client-centered approach. So I really focus on meeting the client and each individual where they're at, focusing on really building that therapeutic relationship and rapport built on trust, empathy, and authenticity. The interventions that I use is going to be DBT and CBT, and I mainly work with individuals who are struggling with depression, anxiety, and ADHD. All right, let's jump into it. So what is ADHD and why does it make adulting so hard? If you are someone who's living with ADHD, then you may know some of those struggles. It can be forgetting to pay something on time, running late to work, feeling like you're surrounded by clutter, being overwhelmed easily, finding simple tasks really challenging. If this is something that you struggle with, then I really hope that this presentation, you'll be able to leave this presentation with either a little bit more knowledge or a new skill that you would like to try. So what is ADHD? There's a lot of information out there and all these different definitions, but I really loved the way Kristen Baird Goldman really defined ADHD in her CBT workbook for adults with ADHD. She defines it as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a neurobiological condition causing developmental differences in the brain's wiring. This difference affects the system in the brain that controls self-management or executive functioning. If you haven't heard of executive functioning is the brain's ability to manage time, prioritize tasks, organization, planning, controlling or maintaining attention, controlling or maintaining impulses, and self-regulation, as well as the ability to maintain and manage our emotions. So before we dive in any further, I do kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the myths and stigmas about ADHD. There's a lot of information floating around out there, and some of it can be harmful, some of it can be confusing, and some of it can be helpful. So I kind of want to break down some of the myths and stigmas that are pretty popular and are often told about ADHD. And so I want you, if any of these sound familiar from your own life, or if something is new and you didn't know that, please feel free to engage in the chat box and comment. So ADHD is a childhood disorder that'll go away in adulthood. This one for a long time was believed for ADHD to only affect children, and this is just not true. The reality is brain imaging confirms that ADHD brains are developed and wired differently, and they look different. And so because of that, this is something that someone manages for the rest of their life. Now, the reason people tend to believe that it's something people grow out of is that adults have learned how to manage, cope, and adapt to ADHD. So, living with ADHD can be something that can be manageable and can even be used to work in your advantage. People with ADHD can't pay attention to anything. So, ADHD is difficult. So, a lot of ADHD, the name kind of is a little bit misleading. Attention deficit disorder. When reality, ADHD is difficulty in controlling attention. So, for instance, if you live with ADHD, you may know that if you're doing something that you absolutely love, you can completely lose track of time. It's what we call time blindness, where maybe you spend hours focusing on something and it feels like 5 minutes, and you completely forget to eat, lose track of time, and your whole day goes away and it just flew by. So ADHD is the ability to hyperfocus, the ability to get large amounts of work done in a short amount of time. My bad. All right. So ADHD is caused by sugar and social media. So this is not true. So many people think it is. And I got a little ahead of myself on this slide there. But ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. There is a 75% hereditary factor to it, right? So only in rare cases can ADHD be developed later on in life, and it's usually caused by some sort of brain injury or trauma. And so ADHD is not caused by sugar or TV or social media. Now, can sugar exacerbate symptoms? Yeah, it can for some individuals. And social media can increase distraction, different things like that, but it does not cause ADHD. People with ADHD have a lower IQ. This one is a really harmful stigma, and it's simply not true. Research has shown that there is absolutely no correlation between IQ and ADHD. Now, there is evidence to suggest that, with ADHD can come higher risk of developing other learning disabilities, but it doesn't affect IQ. Even with learning disabilities, you can still have a higher IQ. It just means you learn a little differently, or you have different strategies for learning. So let's talk about some of the symptoms. And I definitely saw in the chat box that, someone mentioned that, ADHD was considered a learning disability. So there is so much information out there. And so some people see ADHD as a disorder, a disease, a learning disability, or a condition, or just a difference in brain wiring. And so what I like to do is kind of pull in a little bit of both of each of those models, right? There are symptoms that can cause significant challenge in someone who has ADHD. But there are also a lot of strengths that have developed or are a part of, someone who has ADHD. So I want to break those down and kind of go over those with you. And just for fun, if any of these strengths resonate with you and you feel like this is kind of your ADHD superpower, I would love to hear about what you feel like your superpower is. So go ahead and add it to the chat box. So let's dive into some of those symptoms. As before, we talked about executive functioning. And so when it comes to ADHD, people with ADHD tend to struggle with executive dysfunctioning. So this can look like time blindness. Maybe it's running late to work, or or showing up really early, that difficulty of gauging how much time something's going to take. It can look like memory difficulties, often forgetting something, or always misplacing something. If you feel like you often lose things and can't find things. And so that can be part of some of those memory difficulties. It can be poor task management. This, for people with ADHD, is everything feels urgent. And so it's really hard to prioritize tasks when everything feels important and everything feels urgent. And so we'll take some time and we'll break down how to help filter out that sense of urgency a little later on into the presentation. It can also look like emotional dysregulation. So difficulty managing emotions. There's a lot of hypersensitivity with ADHD because ADHD, although it's considered a processing disorder, is the brain's inability to filter out information. So the reason there's a lot of hypersensitivity is the brain is getting so much information at once that it's having a hard time filtering things out. So, so when it comes to emotional dysregulation, ADHD can be quick to anger, quick to sadness. There's also some ideas floating around about rejection sensitivity. And so that one's pretty new in the research field. So there's not a whole lot of information out there quite yet, but looking forward to seeing more in the future. As far as strengths go, people with ADHD tend to be really creative, out of the box thinkers, really good on their feet. They tend to be really good in a crisis. And so due to that impulsivity or that spontaneity, have no problem kind of jumping in and problem solving. A lot of people with ADHD tend to feel like they thrive in chaos more so than in the calm. High energy, charismatic. Oftentimes when I work with clients with ADHD, they tell me that a lot of people see them as funny or witty or fun loving, life of the party. And again, another fun ADHD superpower is the hyperfocus, which we had talked about a little earlier on. So now we're diving into some of those tips, tricks, and tools. So I wanted to start off with the launch pad. And this was one that this is a tactic that really stands out to me and is in the book, The Queen of Distraction by Terry Matlin. And so this book goes in to really describe kind of how this process works. So the launch pad is designed to help with ease some of that morning stress. So if you're someone with ADHD, maybe this is you. Have you ever felt like you have run late to work because you're scrambling around the house? Maybe you woke up late and then you couldn't find your keys, and then you misplaced your phone, and then you forgot to grab breakfast, and then you ran out the door and realized you forgot something that you needed for work. And so sometimes the morning can feel very overwhelming. So this is a way to kind of decrease that stress and overwhelm. So how the launch pad works is it's a designated area near the front door. So this can be like a hall tree, a cubby, a counter, end table. And so when you're thinking of your launch pad, you want to think of different items that you can use. So this can be a whiteboard, maybe clear bins. I do recommend clear bins over any kind of cloth or covered bins. It just makes it easier for you to see what's inside. Think of chargers and hooks for carrying purses, backpacks, as well as any kind of calendars or anything to write checklists on. I do like the whiteboard over any kind of paper items because that's one less clutter or thing that you have to keep track of that kind of takes up space. When it comes to kind of planning all that out, you want to think of your survival kit. What are your basic needs for the day? This is your cell phone, your wallet, your keys, and making sure that all of those important items are on your launch pad ready to go in the morning. So, in the midst of the chaos, that they're not going to be forgotten. It's also great to plan the launch ahead of time. So get all this ready the night before. If you're a morning person, you can get it all ready in the morning. But I think there's a little extra security kind of getting it done at night, making sure everything is in place for the morning. If you have any additional stuff like any work documents, homework, or any gifts or anything like that that you want to add into your launch for the next day, that would be a great opportunity to do that, planning that the night before. Some tips to make it just a little bit easier is really the more senses you can activate, sight, touch, sound, the easier it is for you to remember and learn stuff and really build that routine. So if you can, the more senses you can pull in, the more interactive you can make it, the easier it will be for you to engage with it. And then my big tip, which will be a theme throughout this presentation, is you want to keep it easy, keep it simple, and keep it minimal. And so there's a few more examples in here. So if you're a mom, this is also, if you're a mom who's struggling with ADHD, then, the Launchpad is really great to help organize the kids and get them ready for school as well. Okay. Decluttering the clutter. If you are someone living with ADHD, you may have felt that your space is overwhelming. Piles of mail or documents lining up, maybe, sifting through piles of things, trying to find something. It could be, clothes strung across, the closets on the floor. As long as you see it, it's functional, right? So living with ADHD can be a bit messy, and maybe being messy is, one of those things that you've often heard about yourself. And that can be really frustrating and stressful, right? So here are some ways to kind of help ease some of that clutter and reduce some of that stress around clutter. I want to start off with everything needs a home. A lot of times when there's clutter, it's because it doesn't have a home. So when it comes to finding things a home, you want to pick up an item. Let's take a laundry basket, for example. And you want to think of the most convenient or most functional spot for that item. So where to use the item the most. So maybe the laundry basket, the best place isn't for it to be in the top shelf in the closet. Maybe it's more functional for you to have it on top of the dryer, or to have it in your bathroom or in a location where you can grab it. This can also be, for example, if you go shopping, you buy a lot of soaps, instead of putting them in a utility closet, put them under the sink, have them ready and available, right? So when it comes to your kitchen, is it going to be more functional for you to have your coffee mugs near your coffee maker, or in your pots and pans by your oven, right? And so you want to really think of, where is the best space for this item? Where am I going to use this the most? So when you find it a home, think more of, does this make your life easier more than aesthetic? You can always make things look pretty later on, but the goal is functionality first. So some other things when it comes to cleaning, cleaning can feel so overwhelming. Where do I even begin? Where do I start? This is too much. And often when it comes to that sense of cleaning, it can feel so overwhelming that you just want to shut down and crawl into bed and put it off for another time, or go do something a little bit more exciting and fun. But breaking down cleaning, I really like how Casey Davis really describes that cleaning really is only breaking into 5 categories: trash, dishes, laundry, things that have a home, and things that don't have a home. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the mess, start with something simple. Start with the trash. All right, I'm going to take 10 minutes. I'm just going to pick up the trash. And if the trash is what you get through that day, then that's awesome. That's one less thing off your to-do list, right? So break it down into bite size. You don't have to take everything all at once. Remember, keep it simple, keep it easy, and keep it minimal. Another big challenge for ADHD is the mail. Now, this one can be really challenging. If you really struggle with getting to your mail, you may have experienced maybe forgetting to pay a bill, having lights shut off, or, misplacing an important invitation. So how can we handle the mail? Because tackling the mail can feel pretty daunting and pretty big. So An easy way, again, another KC Davis suggestion is this acronym OHIO, only handle it once. So, only handle it once. That means that when you, and my brain just buffered, give me a quick second. So when you bring in your mail, some people take it straight to the trash can and sort it out there. For some people, it may be breaking it down into other categories. So as we talked about before, we're going to break down how we can take that urgency or overwhelm and break it down into smaller pieces. So when you're dividing up your mail, you want to divide it into urgent, important, and extra. So when it comes to urgent, that's going to be anything that affects survival or comfort, right? So that's going to be your bills, really anything financial or medical. Next is going to be important. This is anything that's going to affect quality of life or relationships. So this is something that maybe isn't urgent, but it does have a deadline and it does need to be responded to within a certain time period. And then extra is anything informational. Okay, so now you see me, now you don't. Let's talk about working memory. So visual aids can be your best friend. And so when you think about it, people with ADHD, there's a word that often floats around social media called object permanence. But really what people struggle with is object consistency, essentially out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you really generally have a hard time remembering it. And so what you can do to kind of help with this is items that are important or that you use frequently, keep in a place that's visual. So a lot of people with ADHD tend to take medicine. If you really struggle with taking your medicine on time, or if you struggle with forgetting, you often forget to take your medicine and you skip a few days, this can really help. So instead of placing your medicine in the medicine cabinet, place it in a clear bin by your nightstand. Now, a lot of people who take medicine need protein or something to eat. You can throw in a few protein bars. So it's right there. You start your day, you eat your protein bar, and you take your medicine. Or if you're a breakfast person, go ahead and put it right where you would make your breakfast. So that way it's within your line of sight. Another trick that I find helpful is that you can actually get a little canister and add it to your keys. So on those really extra hard days where you're running out of the house, you always have it with you in a location that you can easily access it. Another thing is if you've ever gone grocery shopping, if you want to raise your hands for this one, y'all are more than welcome to. Has anybody ever gone to the grocery store, spent all this money on groceries, only to find that in a few weeks later, half of it was expired or went bad? So that one is a pretty big one. So how can we prevent our food from going bad? Well, a lot of the reasons our food goes bad is we forget about it. So this is the tip to help with organizing your fridge. Organize by expiration date. So put the produce and the vegetables on the door of your fridge. Have your dairy items in front and center. And then anything like any drinks, water bottles, snacks, and condiments in the drawer. Those are going to be items that if you really want it, you're going to go for it. But vegetables or ingredients are going to be a little harder to work with simply because you need them to add to other foods. So maybe you look and you're like, oh, I have some spinach. Okay, I can make a salad or something. But if you don't see the spinach, you're not going to think about utilizing your spinach in your meal. All right. Also, use the tools at your behavior. I did see someone in the chat box said that they use their phone, which is awesome. And we're just about to talk about that. Use your phone, use your Apple Watch, use your Alexa, whatever smart device that you have, use it to your advantage. And this can look like, for instance, if you've ever lost your car in a parking lot, I feel like most people probably have. And then you play the card tag game with your clicker and alarm to see if you can try and find it. So a really great way to kind of tackle this is you can take pictures of your surroundings, Or if you didn't know, there's actually a function in your Google Maps where you can tap on your location and it'll pin it for you. So then you can always know exactly where your car is. And so another great tip is making memory external. Use clocks and anything that you can see, right? To really help you kind of manage that time. I also do want to point out, if you've noticed on here that some of these items have this little diamond right over here. I did get some tips from a professional organizer here in Houston called Ellen Delap. And so she helps people with ADHD organize their homes. So I contacted her and got a little extra information to help you guys out with some tips from a professional organizer as we kind of go through this presentation. And all of that information, the books that I use, the people I've talked to, all of that is going to be in the resources. And it's also going to be in your packet that I sent you. So if you're curious about any of the people that I've talked about or books or anything, all that information will be accessible to you. So how do you do the to-dos? If anybody's created a to-do list, you probably know how extremely overwhelming it can feel once it's all written out. You may even have experienced something called ADHD paralysis, where it feels so overwhelming and daunting, again, that you just shut down and kind of just sit in the stress, which then can kind of create that cycle of guilt of, I should be doing this. Why can't I do this? I just need to get up and do it. And it just cycles on. So how can we break down lists? How can we make it easier? A really great tip is when you create that to-do list, what you can do is you can use a sheet of paper, sticky note, cover the list so only 2 to 3 items are showing at a time. This will use that object permanence or that object consistency to your advantage. And what you can do is it helps your brain kind of break down that list into small bite sizes. Another thing you can do is there's an app that can be really helpful. It's the Microsoft to-do list. And when you put in all your to-do list items and organize it by due date, when you go in for each day, it only shows you what's due that day. So you're not feeling overwhelmed by all the things on your weekly or monthly to-do list. Another great way is to warm up, right? So sometimes it can feel really hard to even start a task. Where do I even begin? It's so big. You want to do all of it at once. How do you even start? Well, a great way is to warm up, ramp up to it. So this can start with starting again. Keep it simple, keep it easy, keep it minimal. So start with something small. If it's a big project, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, and then check in with yourself. Hey, do you think you could do another 5 minutes? If so, great, try another 5 minutes. You can set timers, 30 minutes on, and then a break timer, which could be 5 to 10 minutes off. You can also listen to your favorite music. Chores can be really hard to get motivated into. And sometimes the right playlist can really get you in the mood to really tackle all those things and drive you into that hyper-focus mode. And so finding ways that can make tasks engaging, less scary, and a little more fun if we can really help get you with initiating some of those tasks. Another really great one is body doubling. This one works a little bit like magic. So what it does is, here's an example. If you've ever been in school and really struggled with a homework assignment and went to a teacher, a friend, or parent was like, can you help me with this assignment? You sit down and you get it all done. You hadn't even asked the person a question. That's kind of the magic of body doubling. For some, just having someone there increases that productivity and can help motivate you to get things done. This is also really great for cleaning. If cleaning feels very overwhelming, have someone sit with you. It doesn't mean that they have to clean with you. They can sit and read a book or just hang out. But sometimes just having someone in the space can really help motivate you to get a task started and get it going. Now, I do want to preface that if this is someone who's going to anchor you, you want to try and buddy up with someone who's not going to cause a lot of, who's essentially going to have minimal distraction. So maybe not the chatty friend or someone that you love to catch up with. This might be someone that, you can just share the space with. They can read a book while you're getting some work done. My favorite is make it a game. Try and make boring, uninteresting tasks fun. So when it comes to the dishes, if you do not like doing the dishes, try and time yourself. Give yourself 2 minutes. If you can do it in 2 minutes, try and do it in 1 minute and 30 seconds without breaking any dishes, of course. But what you want to do is try and make it fun, try and make it engaging. That's going to take a lot of that stress and overwhelming, daunting feeling out of some of those chores. Another thing that you can do is create that reward system. So ADHD, what makes it different developmentally than maybe some other brains is that there's some hormonal differences in dopamine and norepinephrine. Now, dopamine is our reward system, which means when it comes to boring tasks, we generally aren't getting anything from it. So if you can create a system that can give you that little dopamine rush, that little woohoo, I did it, reward system, that can go a long way. So making things into a game, making things fun, can be a really great way to help manage your ADHD. And there is absolutely no rule that says you cannot make adulting fun. So the more fun you can make adulting, the easier it'll be with managing ADHD. All righty. So just to kind of recap here, what we kind of talked about, because I know that was a lot of information all at once. So some of the key point takeaways are going to be for task prioritization, keep it simple, keep it easy, keep it minimal. All right. So really try and break things down. Don't add unnecessary or extra steps if they're not needed. Sometimes with ADHD, we get so excited, or individuals get so excited about big projects that they tend to, focus on all the big stuff instead of kind of breaking it down into smaller bite size. The buddy system, body doubling, finding someone that can anchor you and help you get started and getting tasks done. And then importantly, make it fun. Try and make it engaging, make it something that you look forward to doing to the best of your ability. And then organization, clear bins and labels, making sure that you're going to be able to see what's in the box and it's easily accessible. Only 5 things to clean. Try and break cleaning down into categories so it makes it a little bit more easier to kind of take it all in, again, breaking it down into those bite sizes. And then Ohio, only handle it once. With working memory, you want to remember to organize fridge and pantries by expiration date. So the sooner it spoils, the closest you want it to the door. And the later it expires, the more further back you can have it. Again, you want to go based on kind of things that you're going to use a little bit more frequently towards the front, and ingredients toward the front, whereas like snacks and goodies or things that you'll go and grab for, like condiments, can be more towards the back. Use your devices to your advantage. You can utilize a lot of different apps, or you can use different systems in your phone to help your camera, your calendar, your timer. Engaging your senses. How can you pull in sight, sound, touch to help engage that memory process? And then the launch pad, a designated area that gets you to start your day, what's in your survival kit, and then remembering to plan the launch the night before. So here are some of those resources that I talked a little bit about in the presentation. So the Queen of Distraction generally leans more towards women with ADHD and how to kind of work on home, managing the home and work and different things like that. So it really has a lot of great tips. Although it does lean more towards women, I do find a lot of the resources and tips in there to be applicable to anybody with ADHD. The next one that I really used for this presentation was the CBT workbook for ADHD. And so this uses, CBT intervention to kind of help with managing ADHD. And it's a workbook, so you can work through it and reflect and kind of engage with it. It also does a really great job of kind of explaining ADHD and breaking it down into, into less clinical terms and in a way that a lot of people can understand it. The next two is ADHD 2.0 and Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, are books written by two of the most prominent ADHD specialists in the field. And they have very different viewpoints on ADHD. I believe it is Edward Hallowell tends to be more strength-based focused, whereas Russell Barkley tends to take more of the medical model. But both have done phenomenal research in the field, and so those are definitely books to look into. Now, if you are someone with ADHD and you live with someone with ADHD, this is a great book. So this is called Dirty Laundry. It is a book written by a couple, someone with ADHD and someone without ADHD, and it really talks about how they navigated some of those relationship dynamics. So although this book is not written by a clinician like the other ones, it really does give more of a personal perspective on how to manage ADHD from a relationship standpoint. Some other resources are going to be the ADDA and CHAD. And so those are ADHD and ADD focused organizations. They have a variety of resources, free resources for a lot of people. And so, it can be resources on, for instance, how to file for a 504 for your kid, or, different tips for adults with ADHD, kids with ADHD. So it has a lot of resources there. The other one is Attitude Magazine. And so this is a magazine. There's generally articles written by different clinicians, or different people who tend to be more experts in the field or specialize in ADHD. So it's a lot of really great information, especially if you have recently gotten diagnosed with ADHD and want to learn a little bit more about kind of what that's like. So here are my references. Again, these references are all listed in that these references are all listed in that info packet as well. And I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining. We are going to take a few moments to kind of talk about some questions and different things like that. So, but if hopefully that everybody took away a little something from this presentation. And if you would like to schedule a free consultation, if you feel like this was really helpful, I would love to learn more about ADHD, or I just need a little extra help managing my ADHD, or someone who may, want to seek professional services, you can call or text these numbers listed here for a free consultation. All right. So let's see, I'm going to scroll through and look for any questions. I do know that there were, so yes. So someone put in here, this book is a great book. You mean I'm not lazy, stupid, or crazy? There's a lot of stigmas that could float around about ADHD. And so in the info packet that I did share with you guys, I did add some Instagram accounts, which I think are really great for kind of that sense of community and validating a lot of those experiences living with ADHD. And I do think it's quite important to build that sense of community about ADHD, to kind of really validate those experiences, because what people go through with ADHD is very real, and it's often very misunderstood. I'm looking to see if there's any particular. Yeah. So I did think I touched up on the pantry a little bit. So same thing with the fridge. Go ahead and you want to organize more by expiration date, and then more ingredients in the front. So for instance, anything that's like anything in the pantry that's going to go bad fast, and is something that you use to add on to food, try and bring that up to the front so that you see it a little bit more clearly. Um, so someone asked, where in there do you clean the bathroom? Fortunately, I did not list that in this presentation. So I don't really have anything for that one right now. But again, I would use some of those tips of, if you're going to organize your bathroom, focus on, functionality and different things like that. When I think it comes to the tip on cleaning, it talked more about clutter, versus like actual deep sanitation cleaning. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm just scrolling through all the comments. I love seeing all of y'all's superpowers. We have good in a crisis, empathetic, creative, charismatic, out of the box thinking, which is amazing. We have some artists in the group. I love it. Um, this is a really good tip. Someone did put in there that caffeine can affect medication from working well. That can be true. Again, medicine, that's going to be something that you want to talk to a psychiatrist about, or your PA, or any kind of medical professional. Medicine affects everybody differently, especially when it comes to ADHD medicine. So here's a question. When it comes to ADHD and being a learning disability, where the learning disability part comes in is ADHD can be a processing disorder. So, or is seen as a processing disorder. So this can look like difficulty. Let me see. One way to think about it is kind of the in one ear, out the other, which is also that narrative where people think that individuals are lazy, not paying attention, or stupid. What happens is the brain has difficulty processing information, and therefore sometimes information just doesn't stick. So this can be an example, which if anybody, you may have experienced this. You are reading a book and you're like 5 pages in, you're like, I have no idea what I just read. So then you have to go back and reread it. And sometimes you have to reread it maybe 2 to 3 more times before it even sticks, which can make reading really difficult and frustrating, especially for a child, which is where that learning disability can come in. There's also a lot of misdiagnosis with ADHD. So again, ADHD, a lot of individuals with ADHD can have comorbid diagnosis of dyslexia or other learning disabilities, but can make it even harder. So pinpointing the learning disability and getting help, that is going to go into seeking professional help with a counselor and kind of working through kind of what areas, you struggle with personally, to get that individualized help, because it is going to be a little different for each person with ADHD. All right. It sounds like that this was a really validating for a lot of people, and I'm so glad to hear that. Um, So, when it comes to red dye being linked to ADHD and foods for children, I have heard that floating around. I do not know much about it, nor have I not done enough research on it to answer that question. But that is something that I can look into. But I do know that that is something that is information that has floated around. The validity of that, I'm not quite sure. When it comes to kids, understanding that ADHD in kids can look a little different than it is in adults. One of the reasons kids are often misdiagnosed or, diagnosed later in life is ADHD can present as either hyperactive, inattentive, or both. And so again, when it comes to tips with kids, it's figuring out really what areas that kid is struggling with in regards to ADHD and being able to kind of pull on their strings. I do want to say if you're living with someone with ADHD, one of the best ways to approach things is approaching conflict with curiosity over judgment. And so this can look like, especially with kids, they forget to do something, forget to turn something in, or, is really struggling with doing their homework, kind of meeting them with curiosity, asking them, what's going on, what are they struggling with, and kind of meeting them where they're at can actually go a long way. Um, it can be really frustrating, but I do want to say when you're working with people with ADHD, meeting it with curiosity over judgment goes a very long way. Any advice to create routines? So routines is going to be more individualized, and I wish I had the perfect formula for it, but for each person, it is going to be a bit of a trial and error. What I can say is when it comes to creating those routines, start with one thing at once. Oftentimes, when it comes to ADHD, you create this whole routine, this whole planner. You're going to wake up at 5 a.m., exercise, and then you're going to meditate, and then you're going to go to work. And you create this full schedule. And when you mess up on that full schedule, it can feel like a complete failure. And so you shut it down and don't do it again. So when it comes to routine, start with one thing. If your goal is to create a better sleep routine, start with that. Just start with 3 to 4 weeks of just trying to focus on that sleep routine. So if that's going to bed at 10, then that's all you focus on and you add that to your routine. So instead of creating a whole routine and trying to tackle it all at once, you want to think about adding one thing at a time. It takes time to build a habit. And when it comes to doing a routine, you want to create a habit. So building the routine is going to take time and it's going to create habit on top of habit on top of habit. So that's going to be a really great way that you can kind of start building those routines. But again, that's going to be more individualized for what works for you. When it comes to ADHD, it is unique for each person, although some of the struggles, symptoms, and strengths are common, the experiences are still unique, which means although these were a lot of tips, they may work for some people in this presentation and they may not work for others. And so it really is about trying different things and adjusting them as you need to make them work for you. So how to encourage teens having ADHD to be successful in life? Um, Understand that a lot of people who have ADHD have faced a lot of stigmas, especially in school environments. So this can look like oh, you're just being lazy, you're not paying attention, do you even care, unmotivated, stupid. And so, a lot of that stigma and shame can create a sense of hopelessness. Um, like, what's the point? Why would I try? Everybody has these assumptions about me anyways. And so, if you are having a teen that's really struggling with ADHD and getting that motivation, I do, meeting them where they're at, providing that support, providing that validation, um, really validating their experience can go such a long way. But if your kid is really struggling with it, then I would suggest kind of reaching out to a professional counselor who can work with you and your teen to kind of help them kind of utilize their strengths and really find that motivation in life that really works for them. How to do morale when some of that self-doubt comes in. So self-doubt can come in when there's a lot of that sense of rejection sensitivity that people often feel with ADHD. And so you can, again, that's different for each person. I know some people who they put on their favorite song. So they have this get pumped playlist or feel good vibes. And when they're really struggling with self-doubt, maybe imposter syndrome, they put on their playlist. For others, it could be going to a validating person and, saying, "Hey, I need to be pumped up right now." And, kind of getting that support from your community around you. But it can be really hard. And so, grounding techniques, and there's a lot of different strategies that can be used to kind of boost that morale. And as much as I'd love to go through everything today, we're getting close to time. So I'm going to try and answer a few more questions. Um, in regards to brain injury with ADHD, it essentially affects, I think there's a whole medical journal about it, and I don't quite have the knowledge, but it would just affect the part of the brain, which I believe is the limbic system, which is the system that often controls a lot of that executive functioning. Um, and so that's how it can bring about ADHD is, for whatever reason, it causes some decrease in dopamine and norepinephrine being transmitted throughout the brain. So there's a really great book. So someone asked, can ADHD be trauma from a young age in regards to like first memory being trauma? There's a really great book. It's called Scattered Minds. And I wish I knew who it was by. But it's called Scattered Minds, and maybe if we can Google it and put it in the chat. But it talks about how the relation between trauma and ADHD. It's on my reading list. I have yet to read it, but I've heard a lot of really great recommendations about it, and so that may be able to help with your question there. I love this. So someone shared an example of a friend who keeps a journal of all her completed tasks and pays herself for each job done. I think that's wonderful. An app that I found that really helps, it's called Finch. It's really cute. You get this little cute little bird, and every time you complete a task, you get to buy cute little things for your bird's outfit or home. So if you tend to lean on the hyperactive side of ADHD and maybe struggle with some of that impulse spending and love to purchase stuff, this can be a really great way that you can use your tasks to buy cute things for a bird. Not a real bird, obviously, but it's a cute game. And yes, one quick announcement, please don't forget to fill out the feedback form. It was listed in the chat box. All right. Someone said there's two scattered mind books. So, let me see if I can find the right author real quick before we end. It's going to be Gabor Mate. So it's the one, the book cover looks like an explosion of color. That is the one. So, all right. Any last minute questions? We have about 3 minutes. I want to thank you everybody for jumping on. And I really love all the interaction. I absolutely loved hearing about y'all's superpowers and all the suggestions that you supported in the chat box to kind of help out, other participants in the group. Again, my contact information is in the PowerPoint as well as in the take-home packet. There's also some activities in the take-home packet to kind of help you utilize some of these skills that we kind of went over in here. And I hope that, for each person, maybe you took a little something home, or at least this was some validation for you. And again, I want to thank you everybody who came on today.